The one I did not mention, Stephanie, which is boring and normally doesn't get a lot of attention, is the PCE price deflator or whatever. That comes out, I think it's on Thursday. That's the first real inflation gauge we're going to get since the second leg of inflation hit after, of course, the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin. What are you watching the most closely this week?
Well, yeah, no, and thanks for having me, Brian. The PCE deflator is certainly important because that's what the Fed looks at, and it's going to be coming in very strong, probably something like 6.4% annualized. So that is way higher than what the Fed wants it to be. But it's not just the PCE deflator. It's obviously, we've talked about CPI, PPI, unit labor costs are also very, very strong. The non-farm payroll number, I know the headline for jobs is the non-farm payroll number itself, but the wage component is also very important, and I think that's going to be pretty hot at about 5.5%. Remember, last month it came in at 5.1%, which was less than expected, but that was because you had a shift to travel and leisure workers, which are lower paid versus technology and utilities. So that's going to be a big number to watch this week for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I don't, obviously got two legs. Inflation, by the way, was red hot before Putin decided to go in with his unwinnable war in Ukraine. Obviously, that just sort of lit the match under it. So I think these numbers are going to be so important to the Federal Reserve. But, Stephanie, does the market, the bond market, no offense to the Fed or our coverage of the Federal Reserve at all, but hasn't the bond market already done the job of the Federal Reserve in some ways? 10-year yield has doubled in 7 months.
Yeah, but inflation is also just rampant, and it's everywhere, right? So, and I don't even think if the Fed were to raise rates 8 times, which is what the bond market is now pricing in, I don't think that slows GDP growth materially. It will to some extent, but not materially. And I don't think it's going to do anything in terms of inflation. Supply chains are a big problem and a big cause for inflation. That has to get fixed. And we're going to get Micron this week in terms of earnings. Let's listen to what they have to say about the supply chains. But I don't think it's going to be pretty, unfortunately.
And but is that a company you like, Micron? Or are you just throwing that name out randomly on a Monday morning, Stephanie?
I'm throwing it out there randomly. No, look, it's very, very cheap. It's a value cyclical, ultimately cyclical company. And they've done a very good job in terms of execution. But I prefer other semiconductor companies like an NXPI or a Broadcom, which have more steady businesses, if you will, rather than these up and down peaks to troughs kind of numbers. But Micron will be a good macro tell on demand, on memory demand, and again, on the supply chains.
Yeah, and, with all due respect to the all-important monthly jobs number, which comes out on Friday, I think the JOLTS number, job opening labor turnover survey, comes up tomorrow, far more interesting. It shows how many open jobs, 11.4 million. It feels like we're at peak employment. I know it sounds weird to say that, but the unemployment claims they're going down. By the way, lowest level since 1969. Is this one reason you like a Paychex, Stephanie, simply because the job market is so, insanely hot right now?
Yeah, and they will benefit from higher interest rates as well, from interest income. But outsourcing has been on fire. Just look what Accenture told us 2 weeks ago, right? They just blew it away, raised guidance again. And so I think the only problem with Paychex, Brian, is it's trading at 35 times earnings. And this is a market that doesn't really want 35 times earnings. It's more of a value kind of a market. That being said, last week was quite interesting because growth did outperform value for the second straight week. So there could be some continued mean reversion on the growth trade because year to date value has outperformed growth by 900 basis points. So you could see growth playing catch up, if you will. Quite frankly, I've been adding on the technology side in my portfolio. I've been underweight for the last year, so I think that's really an area to watch, especially when you get companies like Micron and Paychex. We'll get some good data points this week.